here, but first, thank you all for signing up. I hope that the Windsor Film and Digital Media will be a part of your life and anything that you want to do in film and digital media. And I can't wait until our new building is done and we can do these from the studio there. So we're going to talk about podcasting. And I want to tell you, you basically know me from being on Blackburn Radio for 10 years. And before that was CKLW. I've been from backstage to on the mic to large festivals to Lori Baldassi in the loop with Blackburn Radio. So I kind of know what I'm talking about here when we're talking about getting your audience. But I have someone with me that I am so excited to tell you about. My friend John Bowen here, I have to tell you, he has 38 years in the industry as an announcer from Edmonton, Vancouver, Calgary. John also has rock history music and rock history book on YouTube. He has two different channels. I implore you to check them out and watch how John makes everybody so relaxed. It's like you're sitting at a coffee table and you're just talking, but he asks the questions that you would want to ask. And the strongest thing that I can say about doing interviews that John does so brilliantly is that he threads his passion to inform and inspire. And he connects not only with the person that he's talking to, but he connects with the audience. So I'm going to let John talk a little bit about how you connect with your audience. So to start off, we're going to start out with targeting your audience. Once you decide that you're going to do a podcast, you have to know who are you talking to. Is it what demographic you're talking to? What are their interests? What is going to bring them to you? How are you going to do that? Now, we're going to later on talk about your analytics that you can get from Google and Spotify and all of that, which is going to be your roadmap to who's listening, why they're listening, how long they're listening. But I'm going to kind of throw it to John now to talk about how do you target your audience and keep them coming back. John?
First of all, hi, everybody. The weird thing that happened to me as a broadcaster is, and the biggest surprise before I get into the demographic thing, it's leading to that, trust me, is I started feeling like a deer in front of a Peterbilt when I started doing videos, because I've been in radio at that point, I think 34 years. I'm going almost in May in 39 years. And I'm going, oh, I know how to do this. This is really easy. Then I had, because I started as video and now we switched to podcasting as well as video. So I started realizing that, oh, I can't do this. This is a young man's business. YouTube is all about young people. They're the ones making $1 million a month. But then I realized, hence the name, wait a minute, I'm 61. I'm going to be 62 next week. I'm talking to people my age. Rock, classic rock is my age. So I started going, that's my demographic. And by default, I was just putting all these problems in front of myself. What camera do I use? What do I need? I know all about this stuff. And then I had to realize, oh, you have to do research. You can't, I'm 61. I have to do research. I have to look at this stuff. Just because I think it was 79, it doesn't mean it was. Then I realized, but they're like that too. So my demographic, we're dealing with the same things that I was dealing with. And when I made a mistake, I mean, they're hard on you, but they can also understand. That's another demographic thing that really helped me. I'm going, oh, I'm talking to my people. I could have gone to school with these people. So and I always had a vision being a radio guy of what's Evelyn Everybody or Joe Lunchbucket look like what do they look like in my for my audience. Mm-hmm. And after a while, just by default, whether you're conscious of that or not, you start knowing this amalgamation of so many people that you're talking to. Just by default, it sort of happens. Reading the comments, you can see how old, you can tell how old they are. A lot of the times, if you say your age, they'll say their age. It's almost like a rite of passage. So after a while, it all kind of fits together unconsciously. But if you know them consciously, if you know that audience, it's a lot faster.
Let's talk a little bit about, okay, you know your audience, you know who you want to talk to. John, can we talk a little bit about show prep? How important it is to have everything ready before you hit that mic?
Well, if you're going to do something, you've got to have your ducks in order. You know, so many times when I would do radio in the 80s and I would come on and think, oh, because you're cocky when you're 20 and I would go on there and I think I could rely on my not good looks. You're on radio. They don't care anyway. They all think you look like a boot. And I go, what? Like, oh, my fantastic personality can't get me through. That kind of fervor is great for doing a show because it's excitement, but you can't go in with you just got to know your stuff. And you've got to know if you're interviewing someone, I spend 3 hours before I interview everyone, just before I interview them. So I don't look at my notes, which I have right here for this very podcast. I always have notes and I'm always ready. And I'm always thinking, what does the audience want to hear? What's that one question? Today I interviewed Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull, and I asked our audience for questions. They gave me like 150 questions. And then he's late. He's 5 minutes late, but I'm prepared. They're all right there. Then I'm going, as I'm talking to him, I'm looking at my notes, which are right where these are. I'm going, oh, I can't ask that. No one cares. What's the one question and answer that's going to get the hits that people want to hear? You know, you can't talk about the fish farm, which I did, by the way, because I was curious. But I'm going, I don't know if I'm going to release that, but I asked him about Aquilon and a lot of the big hits that I hadn't asked him the 5 times I talked to him before. I'm going, what's going to get hits? What's going to make people go, oh yeah. See, there's a thing that I did a thing with Jim Neighbors, and just by default, it hit me, not because I'm smart. Jim Neighbors dies, and I'm sitting in front of the camera. I'm going, what can I say? I got to get this up. If I don't get it up, I'm not going to get any hits. This is YouTube. But I've got to communicate and relate to the audience. So do something what a comedian does. You know how a comedian will say something and you'll go, yeah, but they'll make it funny, right? But they'll give you an aha moment a lot, and they'll make you look at the center of the pie from over here. And I went, what can I say about Jim Neighbors that will make me relate to that audience that watched Jim Neighbors? In the 70s, I watched him. Everyone could relate to the fact that when Jim Neighbors, the guy would say, golly, would sing for the first time. Everyone who saw him sing for the first time, they went, oh, wow. And I said that, and every one person after another would go, oh yeah, I remember that moment. I couldn't believe he could sing like an opera singer. I mean, it was crazy. So when you do a podcast, just try to come up with some kind of a zinger. What can make this special, and put that in your show prep and get ready for it. And like I had John Anderson tell me, well, I wouldn't join Yes Again because they're not very good. But he hinted at it before, and I'm going, how do I get him to say that, to say something? And it's in my trailer. That's the first thing in my trailer. He said, there, I said it. And I'm going, everyone could relate to that. We got a lot of response from that.
When you're talking about show prep and you have someone there, it's really important, like John says, to ask something that nobody else is going to ask them. Even if it's, if you're doing a politician or, someone in the music industry or in the entertainment, or even just someone local, they kind of know what you're going to ask them. And I don't believe in shocking people. Sometimes when I do interviews, when I get all this, what's this going to be about? I send the questions first. Doesn't mean I don't ask those other questions, but it makes them feel more comfortable. I'm not into attack radio at all. I want it to be pleasant. I want people to come back and listen to what I'm doing again. And I don't want to offend my guest, and I don't want to ask them something that I know will upset them, unless that's where you're going. But if that's where you're going, be prepared for what happens after. I'm sure John can tell you that when a guest turns, it's really hard to bring it back. John, can you tell us when you have someone, the worst is a yes and a no answer. So try not to ask any question where they will say yes or no, because what you're going to end up doing is saying things like, well, can you tell me more about that? No. Well, how did you get to be like that? We did. John, can you give us some pointers on how to bring that back?
Well, there's 2 things you said. My friend Steve Burgess, there's a closet over here full of reel-to-reels which need to be burnt. You have to burn them so that they don't sound like this because they're old. But my friend Steve gave me all his interviews in the 90s that were all from the 80s, all Canadian people, a lot of people who are no longer with us. And he was interviewing Gino Vanelli. And Gino was just having a bad day. I've met Gino since. He's a nice guy. I don't know him, but he's give you the time of day. And the first thing he did, and if you knew Gino Vanelli in the 70s, he opened up his shirts all the way down to here. Mm-hmm. And he opened the interview by saying, "You don't believe in buttons, buddy?" And he was just joking. And every answer, and I've got it, it's in that box, was yes and no. And if you're going to do that, as a rule in radio or any job, you save it for the last. If you need to be a smart aleck, if it's just coming out of you, if you're the scorpion that has to prick someone, you can't help yourself, do it at the last minute. He told Peter Cetera, "Why'd you leave Chicago to make Chicago albums?" In the beginning. But he still got a good interview because Steve's charming and he's a $1 a word guy when he writes. And that's just the way he goes. And he doesn't regret that at all. That's just the way he is. So the pacing of an interview is really important. But sorry, what was the question? Remember, this is a senior show.
Yeah. How do you bring someone back when you have a guest on and it's either, yes or no, or like you say, they're having a bad day? I can tell you that when Lois and I did a podcast with a gentleman, and he was great in the show prep, and I always have them come a little bit before, and he had never done anything like this, so I sent him the questions, and we went through everything. He was great, and the minute we hit the mic, he froze.
So he was nervous?
Pardon me?
He was nervous?
Oh, so nervous. Yeah. And we stopped because we could edit, and we stopped and we said, "Listen, we're not here to make anybody look bad. So just take a beat. We're going to talk roundtable a little bit, and then I'm going to come back and ask you those questions again." And honestly, we came back, we asked him again, and the minute it came to this guy he is the number 1 real estate person in all of Chatham, Kent, Essex County, multi millions. He called me that night at about 11 o'clock and said, "I am so sorry." He said, "I just couldn't." I said, "Listen, that's why we tape them. We're not going to make you look bad." I said, "But you should really go for some kind of training on this, because your name's going to be out there. You're a young guy and you're the number 1 real estate in 500,000 people. So, just don't put your face out there, be able to talk." And he was, "Thank you for the information." I told him, "You can call me, we can go through it." But John, when you get, I keep calling them clients, but when you get an artist like that, how do you bring it back?
Well, a lot of the times, everyone will have, and everyone here will have their own tricks. There's a trick that you'll go, "I don't know what it is, but when I do this trick, it seems to work." So everyone might have a different one. I interviewed, and listen, I'm name dropping because I want to give you the example. And I name drop anyway, so don't worry about it. Carl Palmer, I was over here doing the interview. I always have to tell you where I'm standing. And he didn't want to do the interview of Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Big drummer, one of the greatest drummers of all time, still to this day at his age. And I was told because of the ELP book, they were releasing it, he had just finished a tour, he didn't feel like doing it. So this is the first time I got on there, and in the beginning of the interview, because I don't get nervous anymore, because they don't look like they used to. They're all my heroes, but they're just guys, right? They're just whatever. And he was just standing there. He says, "Okay, let's get on with it then." And I thought, okay. So I started going, what do I do? I got to get to the human side of this guy. I said, okay, who was the person when you were growing up? And yes, I was waving my hands a lot. Who was the person growing up who made a difference to you? Who's that guy? You know what? I don't do this to everyone, but give me a name. Who's the person that made a difference in your life concerning music? And then I had him, even though people are still saying in the interview, that guy looked like he was pissed off at you. Mm-hmm. He was pissed off. He was just tired. Mm-hmm. He was a very nice man, but that's kind of what brought him along. And I talked about his parents, everyone likes talking about their parents, whether it's a good or bad experience, because everyone's got stuff from their childhood. And I realized that if they're doing interviews, most of the time they're going to be quasi open to talking about stuff. There's a guy who once had Boney James, a smooth jazz guy, when I was doing smooth jazz. In his bio, he put, this album is dedicated to my brother. He lost his brother like that older brother. I lost my older brother. So I started off the interview of going, hey man, I read the bio. Sorry about that. I went through that. Didn't want to talk about it at all. Like, it's like I told him he had leprosy. And I went, well, don't put it in your freaking bio then. But yeah, maybe he was having a bad day.
Mm-hmm. And when you go for an interview and you might have something like John said, you've done your research. I once did some really big research on a manager. And I really, I thought, well, what am I? He's done this for 40 years. He's answered everything. And I came across an article about non-payment of bands. Like it was a financial piece about who doesn't pay a band and what they do. And it was a small paragraph. And this article had to be 15, maybe more years old. And it was a small paragraph. And it was the person that I was going to interview. And he talked about how they were doing the show and, they called for numbers and the promoter was faking the numbers. And he kind of thought they were. So he said to the promoter, listen, you know what? It was before their drop date. He said, listen, let's just call it a day. I'll keep the down payment. You don't lose all this money. Long story short, the promoter insisted on doing the show. They played to a half-filled audience. And so this manager goes, okay, full up. And he went to the office. This is before, this is when you got cash on the road. And the promoter met him with two guys with guns in the office. So he kind of backed out and then he waited a bit and then he went back in with his road crew and they got the money. And he said, sooner or later, we're going to come back around, but we're never going to work with you. And we're going to let everybody know what you did. So I found that out and I brought it up, like you say, the old trick at the end, and it was silence. And he went, how the hell did you talk for another hour? It was like, and he said to me, you did your homework really well. And then we talked about the finance. We talked about what was in the article. But I always like to have something that nobody else asks, that's not offensive, that's connective, that they can hone in on. If they cook, if they ski, Lou Graham, I would talk about muscle cars. He's a huge muscle car, can tell you everything about Camaros, GTOs, classic cars. Greg Raleigh's the same way, muscle cars. So and that doesn't have to dominate the interview, but that makes them more human. And when you make them more human, you connect more with your audience. I mean, we're the Motor City. You talk about muscle cars or whatever with Lou Graham, a lot of people's ears are going to perk up.
You're watching an interview. Sorry to interrupt you. If you're watching an interview, everyone can relate to this. If you're watching an interview and two people say something, it doesn't necessarily have to be funny, but they're both laughing at the same time. Mm-hmm. Something happens to us when we're watching that. You don't have to have a funny interview, but there's that thing where we just like seeing people being happy and they're comfortable. And that's another thing, I've seen a lot of people do this and they're very, very nervous, which makes the person you're interviewing really nervous, but that's going to happen the first few times, right?
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about equipment. So you've got your idea of what you want to do. You've got, your demographic that you want to talk to. You have an idea of your guests that you want to, or your topics that you're going to be. I'm going to go to Ryan here. Ryan had a really unique experience. He did a Zoom podcast with the entire cast, the original cast of 24 with Kiefer Sutherland. So Ryan, when you decided you were going to do this great 20th anniversary podcast,
right?
What equipment did you buy to do it?
I bought a new not a new laptop, new to me, about a laptop. I call it the pawn shop laptop. So I've bought a laptop that I could edit on. I bought a mic that my son wasn't using. He's got a burgeoning hip hop career at some point, but he wasn't using his one mic. So I bought that from him, and that was it. Basically, those two. I wasn't doing video at the time. I was doing audio only. So I got on to, well, I mean, I was on one of my band's podcasts, and they invited me on, and I got the bug. I just got bit and said, what do I need to do to make this happen? And literally a really good mic, and just sign up with one of the, I think originally I was with Anchor. So I kind of did the crash course on how to record a podcast on Anchor. And that led to the second podcast that I did, which is called 20 Years of 24.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
And how did the 24 come about?
Well, I've been a fan of the show almost since the very beginning. So the 20th anniversary was on November 6th. Worked out really well this year because it was this last November 6th was a Saturday. And we had this crazy idea of like, what if we did something on the anniversary date to, let's see if we can get 8 or 9 casts together. Maybe we can do a podcast leading up to it. My original idea was once a month, we'll release a podcast with somebody from the show. And then at the end, we'll do like a small little convention with a couple of different panelists, and we'll maybe do a 2 or 3 hour thing, have some fun with it. In the last 3 weeks, it turned into 350 guests from around the world, 350 fans from around the world, 45 people that were involved in the show, including Kiefer Sutherland. And it was just crazy. I mean, the key for me was having a person that was like a real go-getter. He doesn't know how to take no for an answer, and he's very persistent, but he's not pushy with it. But he came on board. Probably I was doing a podcast for about a month, because the idea was I'm going to do a podcast and interview some of the people. At the end, I'll say, by the way, can I keep you in the loop about this thing I'm going to do at the end? And they all said yes. And then Justin from Hamilton got involved, and he literally got me Howard Gordon first, which is the guy who created Homeland. It was just an insane number. And he got me Kiefer Sutherland within about 3 weeks. Whereas Kiefer Sutherland was like this pipe dream of maybe one day, maybe 2 years from now, we'll be able to talk to the guy and see what happens. And within about 3 weeks, I was on a half-hour call with Kiefer. It was amazing. But yeah, the 24 thing was so much fun, just because, and what was beautiful about that event, no ego. We had no ego the whole day. Everybody was like, everybody was so excited to see each other. Some of those people hadn't seen each other for over 10 years or more. And it was just this huge love fest. I'm actually going to release the footage within the next couple of weeks, but I'll put out a teaser. I'll put it in chat so you can kind of see how it went. It was crazy. It was the craziest thing I've ever done in my life. But now I know I can pretty much do anything else because I got through that and I didn't wind up in a corner crying.
So John, can we officially bust the myth that you need a studio to do podcasting?
Absolutely. Yeah, not at all. I think everyone knows that. Yeah.
I
think people get overwhelmed sometimes. They keep going. They see these people doing this stuff, and for whatever reason, seeing someone do something, they don't have to be a broadcaster, but they believe in what they're doing. And there's that thing that comes upon people. It's like seeing a performer on stage. They seem so big. Well, they're on stage. They're up there. There's that. All these myths come up, and listen, I've got these, but I didn't start with those. I started with just normal. And these are $30 each. They're not expensive anyway, but like normal lamps and a green screen that was like really this big, because I loved having all my videos behind me when I was talking. My son, who's 18 now, edits all my videos. He says, Dad, that looks hokey. You look hokey. And you look like Rico Suave back then. Stop. He came out to me, he says, stop putting stuff on this. Like, just let it go gray. That's not cool, Dad. And he kept, because he has a young mind, and I think everyone here can relate to, you put a phone on someone, they'll go, come on, it's like this, And he started just changing everything I was doing one by one. Mm-hmm. And it made a difference. And you know what? We don't even use my SLR camera anymore, which I spent $1,200 on. We use an iPhone most of the time. It's stuck to one of these round balls because they have the hookup. But I would say it's a good idea to get one of these. Because this is a $120 microphone. But like you were saying, you got a microphone from your son. You just need a microphone that works. And if it's sensitive, don't be too close to it, and put the volume up a little bit. And if you're in a quiet mood, sometimes people, what they'll do is they'll say, honey, can I use your phone? And they'll have a phone upside down. I saw a guy years ago do this. He says, I borrow my wife's phone and I put, the microphones on the bottom. I put her phone slightly out of reach right here, and I record with with my iPhone, and then I put, because I work with Final Cut Pro and most software, you can just link them together. Just snap your fingers really loud to sync them up in the beginning, the old trick, you know, they used to use in TV. And basically this is a good mic if it's there, but you can't put, if you're doing like this, you can't put your mic up here because you got to film yourself, and no one wants to see my left eye that close. But you can, there's little tricks like that. But like you said, see, I'm spoiled because I've always worked with mics for 39 years, right? But you can be in a small little room and use just a phone. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? If you have good enough content, if you have a really good show, that goes all out the window, because they're there because they want to be there, and that you brought them in and you have something that they want to hear, you know, and you're connective. If you're like John is very successful, and when he does his shows on Friday nights, which I'll implore you to watch on YouTube, it's going all the questions, and the more, you know, they talk about music or whatever your topic is, when people are keyed in and that it's rolling with the questions, it doesn't matter.
And there's no mic there. You know, when we do our Friday, we're in our living room, and it's a big room, and we have a really high ceiling in our new house, and you know, sounds bouncing all over the place. People do, last week they did complain a little bit, but you know, we just sit down for an hour before, you know, she has a glass of wine and I have a beer, and we do this thing. And we have to be careful because we're out in the East now, and it's pretty early in the West, and people haven't even got off work. But there's no mic.
Yeah.
It's just off the phone.
Yeah. I also want to bring up now the tone of your voice. I've listened to some podcasts where the content is really good, but the people are pushing their voice like they're on radio. And they talk really down here like this. And
Roger Radio,
you know,
we used to call that.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like, you know, we're creating better content, and, you know, CKLW News. And I was just like, you're killing me with your voice here, because you're pushing it, and it's not you. Just, I can't say this enough. Just be yourself. Yeah. You know, catch a beat. Don't say, listen, I need to take a drink of water, or, you know, or whatever. The more natural you are, the more connective you're going to be, because perfect is for, you know, the radio stations where it's on the 30, 15 second, 10-second thing, you know, that's not why people are listening to you. If they wanted that, they turn on the radio. They're looking to you to connect and to be who you are. And and another thing is, you don't have to know everything about the subject. You can be learning as they're learning, and you can ask things that anybody would ask. Don't think that you have to know everything. You can have people on and clearly do your show prep, find out about it, but be inquisitive. And then, you know, go to your audience to ask questions. You don't have to know everything. You know, go ahead.
I got to tell you something that's funny. When my son was 8, he was a little drum prodigy, and Neil Peart sent him drumsticks when he saw him play Tom Sawyer. I mean, he was very, very good. He's still really good, but he's not at the level at 18 that he was at 8. And one day he was doing this freestyle thing for YouTube, and he forgot a part, and he was so bothered by the fact that he forgot this part. And I told him, "You're the only one who knows that." Mm-hmm. And he went, it was like a light bulb came on. People sometimes, I'll hear from podcasters, "Oh no," because they talk to me all the time. "I can't believe I didn't ask him that question." I'm going, "No, you're the only one who knows that. It doesn't matter."
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't be so hard on yourself.
Exactly. And it's your show, and you can drive it anywhere you want to go. But I would have set goals in the beginning of what you want to get from this person, what information you want to put out with these people. Okay, let's just jump over to analytics. Now, you can get those when you get to your platform, whichever one you choose, whether you're going to tape. I'm a big fan of Baldassi. It's free, it's easy to use. I've used it for years in editing when I do my interviews. I used it when at the college, when we did our TV shows, we did it there. Analytics, let me tell you what analytics are. The most important thing next is your analytics once you're going. And it provides an analysis of listener data that gives you, the podcast host, an insight into your audience. Those numbers, like radio, tell you how long they're listening, how many people are listening, what their age is, did they download it, is it streaming? Once you get all that information from your analytics, then when you get to a certain point, then you monetize, where you can go to the TD Canada Trust in your neighborhood and say, I have 3,000 listeners, 2,000 listeners. This is how much a mention is. This segment brought to you by TD Canada Trust. Or you can do sponsorships. This broadcast brought to you by Motor City Community Credit Union, you know, or a tag here and there. But you cannot go to these sponsors until you have numbers, and your analytics is where you make your money, or where you get your money. And I would not do, I don't know, you can talk about this, John. I would not do produce spots. Would you?
I don't like doing them, but we don't sponsor. We don't have sponsors on our podcast, because the bulk of our money, because our station Rock History Music does very, very well. So we haven't really done that. My son's going to get around to doing it. You know, we've got 4 channels. 2 of them are making money. But we look at analytics on YouTube to find out, okay, when does your audience watch your videos? That's when we have to launch our video. In our case, unlike a podcast, in our case, it's all about hitting, I mean, we have podcasts, like I said, hitting them when they're hungry for the information we give them, right? And finding out when they leave the video, why would they leave the video? How many people watch the whole video? Is it, if they don't watch the whole thing, we should put advertisements or some kind of pop-up that says, hey, coming up, you can watch this or whatever. To keep them in radio, it's always like, you know, making sure they're going to be around. We always have to tell them what's coming up. And if it's a taped thing with podcasts, I've heard some people say, hey, they break in from the interview and they'll go, hey, coming up in 5 minutes, we're going to be talking about this, back to their, you know, whatever they want to say. You know, those videos we watch, hey, the funniest thing coming up in 48, 47, you know, that kind of stuff of keeping them watching. But analytics is very important for me. Like it's everything. And I fought it for a long time because I kept going, no, it's true. I can't understand this stuff. And of course it's easy to understand.
Yeah. And you know, what platform you use for analytics is, you know, you're going to have to do your homework of what suits you, how much it costs, what the reach is, how it goes. But each podcast or each platform that you pick will all give you those analytics, and you can, you know, judge that out as you go. But I would not suggest looking at them until you've launched at least 5 shows. Yeah. And know that your first 5 or 6 shows is your learning curve. Like, don't worry about mistakes. Don't worry about, you know, oh, I stuttered, I did this. The whole thing for your podcast is you're doing it because you're passionate about it. You're doing it because it's a means to an end, but it's not the end of the world. I mean, the more natural you are, I think the better it is. But you have to have some decorum where you're professional too. You know, you see some podcasts where it's just, it looks like a kid's clubhouse and there's foul language. And, you know, if that's what you want to be and that's what your brand is, oh, you know, have at it. But know that you can't swing from one to the other. You have to have a definite brand that this is you. Go tell someone means this. When I listen to go tell someone, there's an umbrella of things that I'm going to hear, but I'm not going outside of that because that's not who I am. I mean, when you're branding your shows, it's about you. It's about your content. It's your name on it. You know, so recognize that you will be affiliated with that. And if you don't care what's going on, then that's great. But to keep whatever demographic you want, you have to think like they do. You have to, you know, you have to be like, you know, you have to find your tribe and you have to keep them in your tribe circle. So
we have this thing in radio through attrition. You lose people, they die.
Yeah.
They something happens to, there's always something. You lose 15% of the audience every year, no matter what. So you're always having to keep that. And that happens with anything, really. Any business will go through a very simple, numbers will change. And we always keep that in mind of going. And it's a thing that, like you were touching on, makes you thrive to sort of, if I say something political just by accident, all of a sudden you could lose a lot of people in your audience, especially in this divisive world, right? Left, you got to.
Yeah.
Best way sometimes is to go like this. Sorry to interrupt, but like this, to go like, well, this side's saying this, and this side, if you ever happen to go there and you don't pick a side, but if you want to pick a side, you will lose those guys, and then you'll have these guys over here, and that's okay. There's a guy who does what I do and just interviewed Eric Clapton. God, he got Clapton. I've interviewed the Eagles, but I never got Clapton. Like, holy moly. And then he got Ted Nugent, but of course he did, because he's very right-wing. He's anti-mask, and that's what he wants to do. And I don't like the guy very much, but I had to look at my wife and said, man, I don't agree with his politics, but job well done. Good for you. You got Clapton. Yeah. It was a great interview. You did a good job.
Mm-hmm. And you, sometimes you're going to interview people, like John said, that you don't like, but you need them. Like John doesn't need them, but you might need that person. You need that person, not to justify you, but it gives you a tick up when you get that certain person, no matter.
Well, look at Kiefer Sutherland, right? Look at that to kick off. I mean, that, like you said, maybe 2 years down, you said it so well when you said that, maybe 2 years, but all of a sudden you got this, like,
it was a pipe dream. It was a pipe dream. Yeah. And the floodgates opened. I mean, really, from the first time I had one or two people from the show, it gave it credibility, which then just led to 47 interviews we've done already.
That's cachet, man. That's cachet.
But Kiefer was a pipe dream. I was like, maybe that'll happen one day. I'm not gonna count on it, but boy, yeah. To the point where Kiefer said to us, I'll join you on the 6th if I can, but I'm pretty busy. And I was like, no pressure, not at all. And then the producers twisted his arm and said, we're throwing a birthday party and the birthday boy's not going to show up. And they talked him into joining us that day. It was beautiful.
Oh my God.
It was crazy. Yeah.
Well, that's the other thing. When you say, sometimes I've tried to get bigger interviews, and most of the time it doesn't work. Like maybe we get the interviews we want 20% of the time, but we'll say, hey, oh, by the way, if I'm trying to get a drummer, I'll say, I've talked to all these guys, and they're all A-list people. Yeah. And so we've talked to a lot of drummers, and you've got that in your holster now. So that's big. That's really big.
Yeah. I'm trying to leverage that as much as possible when I'm talking to other directors, other producers. Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah. Not to name drop, but I almost had Pat Boone for this Friday night. Oh, because for this Friday is the 25th anniversary of Pat Boone in a metal mood.
Yeah,
that's right.
So I want to talk about Smoke on the Water. So I've got him. I'm going to record it later with him. But I just literally Sunday just dropped. I found his management email, and I just said, "Hey, would Pat be interested in joining us on Friday?" He's like, "Oh, he's promoting something. He's promoting something at 86. He's out doing a movie or something." But he said, "But can we schedule something with Pat with you later?" And I was just like, I just threw it out there, going, "Well, maybe." I'm sure I'm not going to hear anything back, but you never know. But you got to,
especially with that. I bet you get him if you follow through. One of the things I'm not good at is I don't follow through. My wife is like she used to sell $3-4 million houses in Calgary, so she can do that. But I'm like, there's that again misconception. Radio announcers are in a little room by themselves. We're not brave. It's not a brave thing to do because we're just by ourselves all the time. But one of the things I've learned is a lot of those older stars, and surprisingly some of the young ones, you know what? They're chasing and digging ditches with toothpicks too when they're off. They're just hanging out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're approachable. A lot of them are approachable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, actors like musicians are in the same boat. You're always trying to get the next gig. Even if your gig is on Marvel right now, you're still trying to figure out, well, what's next? It's a constant journey person thing that you're constantly doing. And that was what's flown through every conversation we've had, is that you're never arrived, and that's okay. You just keep striving for the next thing.
Don't be afraid to ask. A no isn't going to hurt you. All I can tell you is you can be persistent, but do it with class, because if you're harping them and come on, they talked to so-and-so and he talked to so-and-so, because I've lost it. I've asked for specific interviews over and over again and been told, no, not right now, not this, not that. And then I see that they did somebody in my area, and I was like, and I want to.
That's always going to happen.
Yeah, it's always going to happen. So sometimes I write, hey, that was a great interview with blah, blah, blah magazine. And I'm complimentary. So they can see she's nice. She was open. We didn't give it to her. Maybe the next time around. I did get a no, actually, not that long ago. I was telling John, was someone, and the answer back from LA was such an LA answer. I wish he would have just told me to piss off, because he said, he's just not interested. And I went, you could have told me anything but that. So I was just like, okay. I wanted to write back, neither am I. But Lori was, but I didn't.
Lori, I'm going to publicly apologize then. I'm going to get you a Bissonette.
Oh, yes.
From hell or high water, I'm going to get you a Bissonette, because he wound up on my show just because he had to drive to the session. This is Matt Bissonette. He had to drive to the session. He's like, you want to do it now? And I went, yes. And we just hit record and started talking.
Yeah.
But I'll get you a Bissonette. I apologize publicly.
That's okay. When I saw that, I went, that's cool. That's right. He got it before me. That's a get that wasn't, it was like, we'll get back to you, whatever. You just have to be persistent, but do it with class. Yeah. I mean, just do it professionally. Explain why you want. I would pitch what your show is about. When you get your numbers, pitch your numbers. Those are the type of things that are going to give you street cred, and they're going to know that you're a professional, because everybody in the world has a podcast. Anybody can write for a magazine. Anybody can do anything now. So now you have to stand out professionally and show that what you offer them is something that nobody else is offering them at that time. John, do you have any closing remarks to inspire our future podcasters?
Practice, practice, practice. There's a company called Rawlco in Canada that used to do dry runs in radio before they went on the air. And people come up to us and say, on the first day they were on the air, they go, man, you guys suck. And he said, you should have heard us a month ago. But that's the story of practicing. Just practice and then show your friends, or make your friends listen, see what they think. The ones will be honest with you, not like little Aunt Betty who loves everything you do, but if you just practice and you do it enough times, eventually you just become yourself behind the microphone. It just happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yep.